Do you ever feel like no matter how hard you try, Japanese vocabs just slip out of your brain? It's not your fault. Memorizing vocabs doesn't have to feel impossible or boring. You might just need a different strategy. As someone who minored in Japanese and even lived in Japan, I've picked up a few hacks that make learning easier, faster, and more fun. To effectively retain new words, repetitive exposure is key. I split my study time into active and passive learning sessions. When I actively study vocabulary, I only focus on that. For instance, I use the textbook by Nihongo no Mori to prepare for the JLPT N1. I don't force myself to memorize every word on the list immediately. Instead, I go through the list and circle words I don't know. I then use their designated app to write down the definitions. I like how their lists made for me so I don't have to look them up myself, which saved me a lot of time. This is just for me to get familiar with the words. The last step is to save all the words into a deck on Enki. Throughout the day, I review these flashcards to keep the words fresh in my mind. In passive learning sessions, I encounter new words by accident. For example, while doing practice exercise, I note unfamiliar words on the side. After completing the exercise, I compile a list of these words with their translations. Because some words appear repeatedly in different contexts, this process naturally reinforces them in my memory. Over time, seeing these overlaps, whether in articles, multiple choice questions, or elsewhere, helps me build familiarity and eventually remember the words more easily. If you haven't heard of mnemonic techniques before, they involve using visualizations and associations to enhance memory. Think of it as playing around with a word to make it memorable. You can make up a story, use visual aids, or find meaningful connections to help this word stick in your brain. For example, take the word hakihaki, which means clearly or promptly. The key here reminds me of kiru, to cut. To remember this, I imagine taking decisive action like cutting with a knife, quick and without hesitation. I also like to use visuals for my flashcards. Instead of staring at a list of words and trying to memorize them, adding images or drawings makes the process much more fun and engaging. The ultimate goal of learning new words is to use them correctly. Understanding how words fit into real-life scenarios improves comprehension. Sometimes two words may seem similar but carry subtle differences in meaning. By making sentences with these words, you can practice and understand their context. Chunking technique involves grouping bits of information into manageable or meaningful clusters. In Japanese, we often need to memorize a word's pronunciation and its meaning, which can be quite challenging. Here's how chunking works for me. I group words with similar kanji, for example, kyukyoku and kyoktan. They both share the kanji kyoku, so I group them together. I also group words that look similar, such as akirameru, it means to give up. The second one is shimeru, it means to tie. These groupings create patterns that are easier to recall. You can customize your groups based on what makes sense to you. You've probably noticed by now that I prefer writing things down than saving everything electronically. Even when I was in school, I made handwritten notes to stay organized and reinforce my learning. I am a very visual learner, so I color code key points and always include example sentences. I also recommend keeping a small notebook to jot down new words. Every time you open it, review a few of the previous entries. This may be a slower way to build your vocabulary, but muscle memory can make a huge difference over time. When reviewing flashcards or notes, I like to say the words out loud. This not only helps with pronunciation, but also strengthens my memory. Often when listening to Japanese, I struggle to recognize a word I just learned. Repeating words out loud a few times helps bridge that gap, making them easier to recall during conversations or listening practice. These are just a few methods that I've used in the past to memorize vocabs effectively. Of course, everyone learns differently. I would love to know your favorite memorization hacks. If you're struggling with Japanese, I hope my video gives you some ideas to improve your learning. Thank you so much for watching.